Hi and welcome to this new series in which we do a quick but complete overview of all the major effect categories: reverb, filters, EQs, compressors, distortion, saturation and delays, focusing only on the stuff that is important for you as a music producer. If you like this sort of thing and you would like to see more, you probably know what to do. Now without further ado, let's dive in and take a look at our first category: reverb. So, first of all, what is reverb? Reverberation is a persistence of sound after the original sound is produced, caused in the natural world by reflections. Effect units that are specialized in the generation of reverberation are commonly called reverbs. So there is a difference between a reverb and a reverberation. Let's take a look at the first type of reverberation: chamber reverberators, also known as natural reverb. This is the most important reverberation, and also the first type of reverberation known to mankind, which in the old days was the most important factor as to where to record a song. While these days we try to eliminate as much of it as possible in studios. In fact, it is still by far the most commonly heard reverb. Unwanted or not, you can hear the effect right now, as long as you are inside a room, because that's what a chamber, room, hall or space reverb is. A space with 4 walls, floor and a roof that reflects sound. Just pause the video and clap your hands loudly. Unless your room is soundproofed, you will notice the persistence of sound after your hands have already hit each other. This is reverberation, and based on the size, shape and the stuff that is inside of your room, it will sound different. The scientific field that studies these phenomena is called acoustics, and it's a branch of physics. So, should you care about acoustics and chamber reverb as a music producer? And why is it important at all? If the acoustics are bad, microphone recordings will also pick up the bad sounding reverberations of the room that you are in. And if there is sound coming from your speakers, no matter how good and linear they are, the sound will also be negatively affected by the acoustics of your room. But this video is about making stuff sound better, right? Yeah, but for a music producer, this is where it becomes harder and exponentially more expensive. The real studio is not just about the gear. It also has a lot to do with the room in which you record. So, let's take a look at one of the realest studios of them all. Abbey Road, one of the most famous studios in the world, and the place of inception for countless classic records. And a school book for a great sounding room.
This very piano was
exactly,
used.
and you can hear it's the right sound.
Just listen to that. Marvelous. The problem is that to create a great sounding space, you need room. Lots and lots of room. Just take a look at this picture from the Sydney Opera House. Yeah, let's be honest. No one in this audience, including myself, can afford this. And even if we could, it would be a massive waste of your money. Why? Because digital reverb effects have become so good that it has become economically completely unfeasible to build a real, physical, good sounding reverberation chamber. That's why studio owners these days are almost all trying to make their studio sound as dead as possible, minimizing every form of sound reflection with foam panels, bass traps, rock wool, diffusers and even giant springs under the studio, so that afterwards they can manually put reverb effects on their recordings. It is now also possible to do recording, mixing and listening in the same room, while it used to be common to have 2 separate rooms. Because if your recording room is dead, output from your speakers won't be tainted by the reverberations as much. And thus, you get a correct frequency response, so you will be able to use it as a listening and mixing room too. So, let's take a look at how important having dead acoustics are for one of the most respected trio of this era, Noisia. And more importantly, how much they are willing to invest in it.
Yo! Hello, we're Noisia.
Yes, this is Martijn.
3 identical rooms. We had them designed by Brussels-based Thomas Juan.
These are the actual speakers, and this is a custom-made box in which they are suspended, so that the whole design has been made so it doesn't reflect too much, so that you still get most of your signal directly from the speakers. They've all been handmade. This is one of the springs that is underneath each of the studios. There's about 40 to 50 of these. Yeah, they have to hold the whole weight of the studio and then catch all the vibrations without transferring them to the floor.
Damn, that looks expensive. And yeah, it is. Even for a home studio, acoustics can be a true wallet drainer. So much so that a good home studio starts at around 5,000 euros in acoustic treatment alone, unless you are willing to do a lot of work yourself. So, now we know that chamber reverb is not an option and we have invested our entire wallet to make our studio as dead as possible. How do we still add reverb when we want to? Well, there are 2 physical analog options, spring and plate reverb. I'm sure you all have heard these sounds before. They are cool in their own way, but they don't sound like natural reverberations at all. They have their own uses, like plate reverb for vocals and drums, and the spring reverb for that classic surf sound. Now we can speak about the current day, in which we use algorithms and other digital signal processing techniques to produce reverberations with math and code. The company EMT introduced the first digital reverb unit in 1976. But we won't go in depth about hardware systems, as it is 2020 and we don't need external units to solve algorithms. Your CPU is more than capable. Unless you are going for the specific 80s and 90s sound, digital reverbs are superseded by software adaptations. First, what are the most used controls in reverb plugins? Dry and wet. A control that allows to mix the initial dry signal back in with the by reverb affected wet signal. Decay or duration. A control which enables you to set a reverberation time in milliseconds. Size, which sets the size of the simulated space, making the sound seem closer or further away. And the last important control is damping, which is essentially a filter, only changing the wet signal before or after the actual reverb processing, allowing to resemble the effect of objects that are in the simulated space. With these 4 controls, you can replicate a plethora of spaces, rooms, halls and arenas. But there is another factor that influences the sound of the reverb, the actual algorithm being applied. That's why some companies release different variants of their reverb plugins. And developers like Uhe even producing a plugin to generate randomized algorithms and try them out. There are variants of all reverb types available, which if you take into account that there are countless plugin developers, make it so there are 20 pages with 20 reverb plugins alone, which adds up to 400 plugins. But what if you don't want to purchase and install different forms of an effect just to hear the unique sounds that are achievable? Understandable. That's where modern plugins like FabFilters Pro R come into play. Plugins like this have all the possibilities to set up almost every type of reverb you can imagine. There are of course many other options available, but in my opinion the ease of use and visual feedback you get from the interface is unmatched. And in the small chance where you can't recreate the sound you're going for with ProAR, you can always look on KVR through the 400 options for that specific type of reverb you want. So that must be it, right? No, there is one more type of reverb that deserves our attention, if realism is the goal. Convolution reverb, which merges real, natural reverb with the digital world. By recording a short, pure, white noise sample in a place like a church or opera house, you can create an impulse response. A convolution reverb can now use this impulse response sample and accurately process incoming sound as if it were in that exact room. Convolution reverb is not super commonly used, but in some situations it can sound absolutely fantastic. There are even communities specializing in recording and sharing impulse responses. That being said, I personally almost never use convolution reverb. So, finally, how is reverb used and what are some of the situations it will sound good? There are two ways you can utilize it. One way is with a send or reverb bus, where you create a separate mixer track for the reverb and leave the dry-wet control of the plugin on fully wet. And you mix it back in with the dry signal in the mixer in a separate mixer track. This allows you to put different effects before or after the reverb without affecting the initial dry sound. This will also allow you to send multiple mixer tracks to the same reverb or send bus, potentially limiting your CPU usage. If you want to have a bit more information about this, check out my template tutorial for an overview. A different, more commonly used method is using the effect as an insert, in which you put the effect on a single mixer track and mix the dry signal back in using the dry and wet controls in the plugin. There are no set rules to when you should and can use a reverb. They are literally used on everything. Vocals, drums, recorded instruments, digital synths, basses, leads, effects. Just about everything you can imagine. One thing you have to be careful of is to have not too much reverb on frequencies below 300 Hz, as this will result in things sounding muddy and phasey on systems with a mono subwoofer. Luckily, on almost every reverb plugin, you can use the dampening and filtering controls to get rid of this. I truly hope you found this video to be helpful and informative, and thanks a lot for watching until the end of the video, you friggin' legend. With that being said, only 3% of the people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So please help a brother out and hit that thing, and click all the other buttons too. Have a great day, and I hope to see you for the next episode of this series, Filters. Until then, check out my previous videos.
Wow.